And we're live. Welcome
Hey,
everybody to Fakewhale. We have Mario, and we just went over how to pronounce his last name. I'll murder it, but Klingemann. Did
that's
I do
good.
okay?
Well,
All
it's
right, probably
the
one of
English version. Yeah.
the
So,
Quasimondo. How's that?
well, Quasimondo is good. Yeah. So as long as you don't say Quasimodo, but yeah,
That's
I don't know. I
well,
made
that's
it in a
something else.
way so people get it wrong.
Lovely to have you with us. I've known of you for quite a while now. You're what they would call an OG. A lot of people would call an OG. Um,
Old geezer.
Well, I mean, on that note, I would love for you to introduce yourself just a little bit, if you have kind of like a succinct way that you like to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
God, that's always a difficult. Okay. Well, I
Well, I like to
usually
ask it.
say, yeah, yeah, I'm an artist and I work a lot with AI, but of course it took me a while to get there. I started with what's now known as generative art and kind of worked my way through this. But yeah, I guess at the moment I am what you call an AI artist
Okay.
until they come with their pitchforks and hunt down all the AI artists. But yeah,
Or just
and
have a better name for what's going on actually here.
yeah,
But we'll get to that.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to go even before that then. So I wanted to get before AI, we go generative. So you were doing like generative artwork before that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I did. So I don't know. Well, the long story, I don't know. We have time.
Well, yeah, we do. Well, what I'm really angling at is like, what was like your life like before, like leading into just being an artist in general, whatever kind of artist it
Oh,
was, like
yeah.
what brought you there at all?
Okay, so I'm a computer kid. So I grew up in the time when suddenly we got all these little devices. I don't know, starting from a pocket calculator. That's how old I am. So which was exciting, and digital watches, and of course little computer games. But then early 80s, also the first kind of home computers and programmable calculators came up. And
Yeah, let me stop you just for a question or 1 second. What were those early calculators that we used to have in advanced classes in high school and stuff like that? Were they like the T something Texas Instruments
Well,
or
I have actually. Should I show you? I have it in my
sure,
stash there. So I think I have
sure.
it somewhere. Just a sec.
Wonderful. I love the visuals, getting the tour.
Uh, so this is what I kind
Yeah.
of. So it's a Casio PB100. That was my first computer. So
Wow.
and it was basic programmable, and as you see, no display. So the only games that you could write were guess the number, or I don't know, something like print some random strings. But in the end, it was kind of what got me into like seeing how amazing programming is
So
as
how
a
old were
general
you and
idea.
how old
Hmm?
were you? How old were you?
I think with this one, I was, well, I'm never quite sure. I was 12 or 13, something like that.
Wow.
It must have been 82, 83, or yeah,
Wow.
I think I was 12. So,
Wow.
and then, well, my father always brought back these little gadgets. So then we had a bigger one, which actually had a little plotter. So I can bring that too. I have that
That
here
I
as well.
printed out.
Yes. So you want me to
And
show you?
yeah, sure. And I'm,
One
I'm also
second.
curious.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Because
for
I
it.
have all my stuff here.
I love
So,
this. This is your studio looks amazing. For everybody that's not watching this,
it's
that's only
my
listening, your
hoarder's
studio is
chamber.
amazing.
So this was the second one. Oops. So this had, I mean, I think it works. And here you see it has a
Yes.
little plotter. So very small, but
Wow.
tiny pens.
So for
And
everybody listening that can't see this, there's a little printer, almost like a
yeah,
receipt printer on the side of the calculator.
yes. And there are actually
Those are
well,
cool.
these were not from the early days. This was just when I kind of pulled it out of the box again and thought like, oh, can I still program this? But basic is horrible. Basic
Well,
was great back then, but it's kind of, I mean, I lost patience. So it's a
I mean, I have no idea what you're even talking about, but those images look dope as hell to me. Like for everybody not the only listening, not seeing, they were like plotter prints of like the generative art type things coming out of this 80s computer thing. So I mean, that's fascinating to me. So you're just always interested in that,
Yeah.
in technology and stuff. Were your parents kind of
Uh,
leaning towards that? You said your father would bring
yeah,
home these gadgets. What, like, from where?
Oh, so no, my father worked as an engineer, and they were working with what's it called? I always forget the name. When you measure the kind of what is it, like a surveyor? So, and they built
Oh,
actually also back in the 80s already kind of tools for digitization of this stuff, because back
yeah,
then it was all still kind of these things were drawn by hand, and so they actually had these gigantic plotters
yeah.
in their office, and of course that might have influenced me myself. I mean, I never used those, but so in a way, I got so through my father, definitely kind of, he was always interested in gadgets and bringing them home, and I don't know, a chess computer. So anything that had buttons and blinked was coming to our place. And so,
That's awesome. I
yeah,
love
that
that
was good.
connection. Your
Yeah.
father, when you say surveyor, like a land surveyor.
Yeah, land surveyor, but in the end kind of they turned into kind of like, because of course the whole digitization started back then when kind of everything was digitized, and so
Hmm.
then it was about making maps and plans with yeah, with computers.
That's actually
And
quite fascinating. And to me, it makes complete sense to what, like, into your, yeah.
definitely. Well, and my mother, well, she is, I would say she's an artist, but she never realized that. So she always painted and actually tried me to get to paint, but that was never my thing. But she's actually a really good artist. But in the end, I don't know, from, I don't know, the family history, she just was not, I don't know, we are not really a family of artists in that sense. Even though
Yeah.
in the very kind of, somebody was actually a theater director, but in the end, kind of, it was not an option back then. Also, yeah,
Yeah, no, I understand, but it makes sense. Like, I like that, like this combination, and you as the result makes sense to me, and I dig it. That's why I ask these questions, because I love just seeing what makes something, like what
yeah,
created
absolutely.
you. And then, so like, did you, like, were you really into this stuff in high school, it sounds like, and then
Well,
did you go to
yeah.
college for this stuff too?
So yeah, from that one, I went to the Commodore C64. Of course, I most of the time played games, but I also wanted to hack the game, so I had to learn assembler in the end. But all that was still not really something where I would say I was an artist, right? I was just making pretty pictures, and but I found it very fascinating. And but at that point, it also did not seem like anything you could make a living from. Or I mean, there was also no examples kind of where I could see, oh, actually there are artists. I mean, there were of course examples, but they never came across my way. I mean, the pioneers. And so, but yeah, I guess I loved creating things and making things. So I also did photography and had my own
Hmm.
dark room. So, and even back then, I always loved experimenting. So not just taking the stuff that came out of the camera, but of course, when you have a dark room, you can play with multiple exposures, putting stuff on the thing. I mean, the usual kind of, well, generative photography or something. So yeah, and yeah, I always like manipulating images and trying to get images which are different from what nature gives me. So that was definitely something. And of course, then trying to get it into the computer, which at this time was still not really kind of powerful enough, and everything took ages. So it was baby steps. And yeah, in school, I also did kind of the school newspaper. I don't know, I was doing layout and got influenced then by, I think my first design hero was Neville Brody. So I don't know if you remember him. He was the uh, kind of, what is it, art director of the Face magazine. So we are talking about early 90s, late
Okay.
80s now. And that kind of very much influenced me, this kind of Russian constructivist inspired graphic design. And so there were all these kind of seeds set that I wanted to go a direction which was somehow involving visuals. And but yeah, it didn't look like there was anything like you could learn. I don't know that you could learn that without having to learn it. And I'm super lazy. I yeah, I hate it when people try to tell me kind of how something works. I want to figure it out myself. So I think I applied at a photographer school because that was at that point seemed to be the most easiest way to get across. But they didn't take me because I would have to have like an assistantship at a kind of with a photographer. And again, that didn't like appeal to me. I want to get right into the work. I don't want to learn like how to. I mean, it's very stupid, but so in the end, that didn't happen. And so through some accident, meeting somebody at some party, I heard, oh, actually, at this advertising agency, which at that time in Munich was doing pretty cool stuff, they are looking for an intern. And then I called them next day, and they took me, and I became that's kind of my first and pretty much only job I ever had, which was like in an advertising agency. And at first, of course, very boring. I don't know, the usual stuff. I mean, now you are not allowed to do that with interns anymore. I think like doing very boring stuff for very little money, but
Sure.
And that's where I resisted. So I always said, oh, but I want to be in the creative meeting. I want to brainstorm. I want to do something. And
Really?
Yeah. So I used probably, no, I mean, in the end, I did what I was supposed to do. But in the end, I also kind of knew that I wanted to do something else, and told them. And eventually I got my chance. And what was it? I think, I had to, I don't know, the agency had messed something up, and they had to write kind of an excuse letter to the client. And then, I was asked, oh, do you want to write that? And then I put all my creativity into it, and that was really good. So the client liked it, and then they said, oh, it looks like you are not that, like maybe your talents are like used the wrong way. So, and that way I eventually became a junior copywriter first. So no graphics.
Whoa.
No graphics. Yeah. So that's the thing. I also like always different things, and in the end, as long as it's creative, I enjoy it. And so creating slogans and texts and something that was very nice. And I had some really good mentors at that time who I respected, and where it was okay that they taught me something. And so we have the long story. So I had the chance then to go to London for a month. Like that agency had a kind of worked with another kind of with some other people like this, and that was Tomato. I don't know if you still remember them. Tomato was a collective of super cool people. You definitely know two of them because the band Underworld that you surely know. Yeah. They were also part of that collective, and they had extremely cool. And so I had this amazing time in London for a month, being the intern there, but it was kind of very graphical at that point. And so I found that exactly like the way I wanted to work, because they were at that time working like probably a lot of people are working now. So I don't know, kind of no job description. Somebody made something, left some trash, the other took it. And so what also was happening, that they had actually a Macintosh computer standing in the corner. So nobody used that one. That was the funny thing. It looked like it was just standing there. And whenever I had nothing to do, there was Photoshop on it. And of course, until then, I had not access to Photoshop, because it was 1991, so really early version. And I started playing around with filters and doing kind of like, okay, what happens if I put filter on filter? And then I realized, wow, this is what I want to do. And so I came back after that month and quit my job very shortly after, and became decided to become a graphic designer. And and I was lucky because there were some clients, because they're that at that time kind of also through these contacts in the agency, techno scene started in all Germany and of course US, and there were all these techno parties, and they needed graphics, and so I started making flyers and posters, and that's where the generative art comes in. So now we are at the point, because Photoshop had a plugin which was hidden on this. So I actually bought me Photoshop. That was my biggest investment at that time. So not even a pirate copy. I bought it, and on that kind of because I was always looking for plugins, because that was the thing, right? Like more effects. I found this thing called Filter Factory, and that was kind of a very bare plugin, which had 4 text boxes and 8 sliders. And what you could do with it, you could write with a very, very limited code. Yeah, you could write generative art filters. You could program your own plugins. And it was not very well documented, but very quickly I came across some other people through CompuServe who also were dealing with it. And so there was this whole kind of several years where kind of this mailing list was going on, where people shared their latest discoveries, how you could create kind of really amazing stuff with just these 4 text boxes. And it was really super. It was actually working like a shader now. So in a way, every pixel was run through that code, and it had kind of a 56 memory slots, which kind of were passed on through the iteration. So you could do weird stuff where kind of you pass on a pixel to the neighboring pixel. In the end, I don't know. But so there was an amazing outburst of creativity where kind of people came up with new tricks. And and that makes me also kind of this grumpy old guy now, because of course all these tricks get rediscovered again and again. Like what can you do with pixels? Okay, so you can change the colors, and you can kind of read a pixel from somewhere else, or you can combine them, and then with all these things, you can have I don't know. So you have a small tool set what you can do with pixels, and then you try everything that you can do with that. And so of course you come across typical things like displacement maps, or I don't know, spherical distortions or spirals or weird plasma fields. And so but that was fun. And I don't know, technology moved on. I got bored again, and got into motion graphics then. So there was After Effects coming out, which meant you could do the whole stuff that you were doing in Photoshop now with moving images. And I also at that point tried some C++ and writing my own filters, again with not that much success. C++ never really, I mean, some of them were working, but nothing really also, again, computing time and power. So at that time, things still took, even now we are in 1996, 97, computers were not that fast in processing these, I don't know, big frames. I mean, we're talking 1024 pixels. So that's actually something interesting about innovation or experimentation, that if things take long, you just cannot try that much. And and of course, also not having GitHub or kind of easily getting code from somewhere also, of course, took longer, having to reinvent the wheel. I don't know, trying to figure out your own algorithms for something where you now can just do an import. And I mean, I'm happy for that. I mean, that costs so much time, always finding some interesting algorithm, but it was C++, and then I had to port it to Flash, which comes after that. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how long. Let's cut it short. So after the motion graphics came the Flash times, or actually the internet time, right? So because that was .com boom, and of course I was also kind of getting sucked into it, building websites for people, creative ones. So with a few friends, we founded a little collective where we created creative websites for clients, big clients. So, and that was then Flash. So I then followed my 12 years of, I guess, maybe 12 years of Flash. Is that around that? So where also I started to think about more that actually I should be an artist, or I am an artist, but just nobody knows that. So yeah, I tried to figure out how to break into this. So that was happening in the, like, starting from 2000 something, 2000, and then try to figure out how do I get in there. Damn gatekeepers.
But you made it in. I mean, and
yeah, surprisingly, right? So, I mean, that's the thing. So, what I didn't mention before in my intro, what I'm really interested in is kind of figuring out how things work. So, that's kind of the curiosity. And so, and that means I see everything as a system, as a complex system. And I try to figure out what are the rules that make it tick. And that's so art is just another system which has a lot, very complex, and a lot of rules which are hidden. And but yeah, I made up my theory how to, like, what it's needed to become an artist. Actually, yeah,
you quantified it.
But yeah, the rule number one I kind of totally overlooked, which is that you first have to say that you're an artist. So that was always my naive theory that, like, oh, if you just keep on making nice stuff, people will eventually find you and they will call you an artist, and then everybody will know. And
that's
no, you have to actually, that's kind of where you have to work on it. And I mean, you have to make good work or put work out there. Actually, you have to put it out there. You have to kind of,
yeah, that's a big part too.
Shove it in people's faces, and then, but you also have to say you're an artist. You cannot say, "Oh, I'm a computer nerd who loves making pretty pictures with code," because then they say, "Oh yeah, that's nice. That's good. Not good work, nerd." And here is blah 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 artist who just whatever told his assistants, can you make something that looks like this? And that's then usually how it works.
Yeah, well said. I mean, like,
no, I mean, in the end, it's, of course, every nerd is also kind of an inspirational source for already well-known artists who ran out of ideas.
Yeah. True that. Yeah, fucking true. And like you said, you have to, like, no one else is going to call you the artist first. I don't think either, which is it's super funny because I existed in naivety as well for a long time of, like, if I just make the best art possible, I had this romantic idea. If I can become undeniable. Yeah, that's not a thing. That's romantic.
Yeah.
That's a romantic thought. So you said so many interesting things in this whole thing. I love your journey. I mean, the fact that you were a copywriter for a while is really interesting to me. I remember taking copywriting myself in college and being just, like, having the hardest time with it. But also that, to me, is very different from you as an artist right now and what you're doing now. Like, copywriting is a completely different thing, like most artists aren't copywriters. Most copywriters aren't artists.
Well, I mean, it helps, I guess. I mean, there's the problem, like, you still have to write texts, right? I mean, that's the problem.
You do,
cannot
but copywriting is usually
art. You have to write about it, and you have to sell
copywriting to be like lying. It was, like, always for a client, for advertising, and, like, how do you spin this in a way that makes people buy it? That's what copywriting is.
Right, but it involves psychology. It involves also being funny, ideally. I mean, I always like to be funny, or at least clever, I mean, so yeah.
There's a real trick to it, for sure. Like, good copywriting to me is magic. Like, it's like, it's because for me it's really hard to do, but I recognize
for me it's hard too. It's always something like, wow, it's even hard. I mean, yeah, because you have to put down every word. I mean, not nowadays anymore, but in the end, for me, working with text is really working like sculpting. So I usually take a piece of text or a sentence, and then I shape it around and look for maybe this word fits better, and look at the rhythm. And so in the end, a sentence or a paragraph is still kind of needs to be composed, which
Yeah, you
I
craft
mean,
it.
except if it's for kind of a recipe or something. But
Yeah.
so
No,
for me,
yeah, I like that.
it's in the same kind of latent, like it has kind of the same latent roots as images or sound. There's
Sure.
always rhythm and rhyme, or not rhyme, but some kind of a resonance.
Composition.
Yeah, composition,
Yeah.
exactly. Style. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And the fact that you're a graphic designer is really interesting to me too, but and for a different reason, because you don't seem that interested in image, but graphic design, I mean, even though it could be rooted in so many things, philosophy and other things, in the end of the day, it's meant to be completely visual. Like graphic design isn't meant to be like a viewer is meant to take in a good graphic design without noticing the design. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's meant to
That's
just be
right.
like and and so like and for that to happen, the image has to be so strong in whatever sense that means. The composition has to be so strong that it's not even noticed and it's subconsciously getting through. But for you, it doesn't seem like the image is important, or like that those things would be that important. It seems more like the the way the image is come up with is more important to you.
Yeah, I mean, if I knew exactly what I'm looking for, maybe, yeah. I mean, in the end, for me, the entire composition of it is important, or so that all the parts work together. But again, I'm lazy, so that's really dangerous.
I'm glad
So
you brought up the
also,
lazy thing too.
yeah, no, and I also like people like to leave some work to the observer, or I don't like to make it so simple. And so
Well, therein lies
at least
art.
I believe that I always leave something in there to be discovered. Maybe
Yeah,
not. Maybe so, but so in the end, yeah. Let's say some of my things are not really polished, because that's for me already the point where it reminds me too much of the marketing world, like that I
hmm,
came from, where uh, when I feel already got the message across, or I already said what I wanted to say, then I don't want to spend any more time on polishing, which is super stupid, because it's
no,
actually
it's
so
not.
important. No, 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 it is. So in the end, well, I see that all the time. So if you have kind of a
It depends on what your objective
concept,
is, because the economization of time is really smart. You know, like if you got across what you need to say, what's the point of keeping talking?
no, 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 but the point is, then more people will be listening if it's nicely packaged and comfortable
Or
to
louder, but that
consume.
doesn't mean it's
So
better.
I don't know. But so I like to make it difficult, and that means it's not as, yeah, it's not so palatable usually.
Sure, yeah, yeah. Can we talk about that lazy thing that you said? Because you went from saying how lazy you were into talking about how you got a job as an intern and went over and above. Like you wanted to sit in all the meetings and you wanted to do more than, and you're like, that doesn't sound lazy at all, man. But so like
Maybe lazy is the wrong word.
well, do
So
you find yourself it's more like when you're not interested in something, you just have zero time for it. But if
yeah,
you're interested in something, you can do whatever, because I'm that way, but I
yeah,
don't consider
absolutely.
myself lazy.
No, no. So I'm easily bored. I think
Yeah,
repetition and meaningless tasks bore me to hell. So,
yeah.
and that's really, I mean, I
Same.
don't know, maybe it's kind of, what is it, ADHS or something, but
Yeah, but
I don't know.
I
I
don't consider
never
it
got
lazy. It's
tested.
almost like over effective, because it's like I know what the best economization of my energy is, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to waste it on that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I'm really getting extremely angry when I have to do something, when I have
Yes.
to say something again, or to do something again, which, or I have to do something despite me having kind of said before that it will not work, or I don't know. So in the end, anything
Dude,
that feels inefficient makes me extremely mad. And yeah, there is really kind of and that makes it so hard to work on something like that. And so yeah,
I'm
it's
cracking up just because I love how open you are about you're just using the word extremely angry. What does that mean, man? Like tell me. I want because I
no,
do
I mean,
too.
it means that. So I'm really getting angry. It's I'm getting a bad mood, and I hate what I have to do. And I mean, the worst thing that you can do is send me a form, because that feels like this is torture. I mean, oh, I give it away, but if anybody ever needs to torture me, just put some forms in there, ideally somewhere on page 2 I have to enter exactly the same that I entered on page 1, or yeah, that's physical torture. It's I don't know. I mean, I wish I could take a pill that I can, like, kind of relax pill and say, okay, we have to get through this. No, I can't do it. It's I mean,
Dude,
so,
I'm literally crying,
oh
laughing. Like I needed to
no.
hear this, like, because I'm the same way.
Oh,
Like when you said forms, I just was talking about this in therapy the other day about like the level of anger I feel when somebody makes me like repeat a form, or when something doesn't go right because
yeah.
of purely some bureaucratic bullshit that just is like, and it gets in the way. Like I got so mad the other day, like I just so like I wanted everybody on the planet to suffer for a minute just because I was so fucking pissed. And for
That's
you
it.
saying this, man, I just felt it
Oh.
so deeply. I needed to hear this, man.
Oh, I'm happy. Well, next time, okay, maybe we can swap forms. Maybe that's more fun then. Next time.
Fill out each other's forms and just fuck it, dude.
But have you
Form.
found any way to kind of like any tricks how to overcome this? I don't know.
No, that's I'm telling you, man. Literally, just this last week, I was talking to my therapist about it because I still like in a lot of ways in my life, I've been able to overcome anger and like get smooth out irritation. But when it comes to that shit, what you're talking about exactly, it still triggers me. I don't like the word triggers, but it's still within an instant where I'm like, I'm feeling one way, I'm feeling fine, and all of a sudden something like that happens, and it's just like,
Yeah. No,
I'm gonna,
it's no, it's terrible. I don't know, and it prevents me from doing. I mean, I have
exactly.
turned
It
down
gets in the
jobs
way.
because I have
Oh
to,
yeah.
or I turned down invitations to something because then they send me
Money
this form.
even, like paydays, you're just like, "Never mind, like, if I have
Yeah,
to
no,
do all
oh,
that
come on,
bullshit."
no, 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 no. I hate it kind of if like that's kind of the other. I think I nailed it down to time. So time is for me kind of the most precious
Yeah.
thing, because it's kind of the one thing that is kind of not, you can
Mhm.
like, not multipliable. I mean, of course you can hire people, which gives you more time, but so in the end, anybody who steals me time is, I hate them.
It's like a
So
mortal sin
yeah, no,
to, like,
it's
steal
really kind of the
time.
worst thing you can do to me is waste my time, because
Yeah.
I love wasting time. That's the other thing. I mean, I try to work very efficiently sometimes. Like if I'm
Mhm.
interested in that, then very quickly done. And then I've saved so much time that I can waste without remorse. So, and
I
wasting
re
time, I mean, of
Wow.
course, wasting time means not like necessarily watching TV. It means just doing some other task, which at that point might not lead anywhere, but I just enjoy doing. And and then, yeah, I can totally kind of sink into that. And then bing, email, oh, can you clarify this? Gone it is.
That you're hitting it on the head. I relate so deeply, even to the point with the time. I've also deduced that it's about time, and then I've deduced even from there, like, attention is really important. Like, if you're gonna waste my attention, like, don't pull my attention away from this because it's so important over here. And if you take my attention away from this, that's a punishable offense.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. No, no, no. There, I mean, Twitter is the worst offender. So there should be kind of actually a attention budget everybody gets. So because in the end, like when you ask for attention, you are kind of, in consequence, probably stealing a lot of people's time. So like, and so in the end, like there should be something where you per day only have a certain attention budget that you can spend, and then you can weigh it or so. But then you have to wait till next day before you can show me whatever you did.
I like that, man. Attention budget is a really
Yeah,
funny
no,
little
it's
statement.
yeah. I mean, it's, of course we all live from that, and we always all try to get a piece of the attention cake. But
Well, yeah, there's
it's
a really
Yeah,
There's a really
it
funny
goes
thing I
around.
heard a
So
long time ago called, this is so off topic at this point, but whatever. It just was like, why do they call it paying attention? Like, why are you paying
mhm.
attention to everything? There's no other like word that we use that we're paying as it's a commodity, but we commodified attention. And then I heard it as, why do you call it paying attention? And the answer was because attention is the price you pay to make something real.
Yeah,
You know, so
exactly.
like it to bring something into fruition or bring something into reality. So basically, if you're taking somebody's attention and putting on something else, and you're taking other people's attention, you're using their commodity, you're using their commodity, or my commodity is being taken from somebody else to make their thing real, or my, you know, so like it's all like who's gonna, yeah. So
No, absolutely. Yeah. So that's,
anyways,
yeah.
that
A lot
was
of
just
people
really
are in attention
beautiful.
depth then. Like they're asking us to, like, I don't know if that works, but yeah. So
It does.
we have to pay so much attention and they never pay
Exactly.
back.
Exactly. Yeah. See, it works. It works in so many ways. I
Well,
love
maybe
this
they
little
do. I
diversion.
mean, that's what we have now, right? Like I pay attention to yours, you pay attention to mine.
Yeah.
We are wasting people's time right now.
The attention, yes, we are. The attention economy. Like,
It
yeah,
is.
yeah. I think that's been used in like social media context before, even that term. So, anyways, getting back to your practice in art. So, you found generative art pretty early on. I know you mentioned Underworld in this whole thing, and then I know that you did a generative work for Massive Attack. So I know we have this connection to where do we go into where you become more of an artist, you know, where it's more of like your practice is your focus and you're driven by the ideas that you want to bring into the world kind of thing instead of fulfilling somebody else's ideas.
So I think it started, I mean, of course, it started in my Flash time. So I also did some early processing, but somehow at that time already I was in Flash. So that
Can I,
was a biggest mistake.
and sorry to interrupt there, but as
Oh,
you were talking about Flash earlier too, I wondered like, is Flash even still around? Because I
no,
remember
no, no.
learning
That's kind
Flash.
of one of my biggest problems. So I spent, let's say, 12 years of my golden years on something where I can't even show people now what I did. And I mean, there is the code. I mean, I can still show it on my computer, but of course
Mhm.
now it doesn't even work in the browser. So, and
Whoa, really?
it's very frustrating because of course I did everything. I was saying, I did a lot. I mean, all my creative research, building up my own code library of pixel and vector and all this stuff, all the ingredients you need to produce generative art is not totally useless. I mean, I sometimes go back to my old code base and say, oh, I think I've written this kind of whatever code, and then I take it out and convert it to JavaScript or Python. But in the end, I have nothing much to show because, again, because of my laziness, I never documented my stuff in a good way. I mean, I documented it on my old blog, which you can still find on archive, but at some point I switched websites, so it's not even like found by Google anymore. So kind of very important part of my own history is kind of very hard to find. And yeah, so that's, so in that sense, I should probably have kind of stayed with processing at that time, but I actually even know why. So Flash was actually before processing, right? So you could already, like, that was the platform where you could combine all the multimedia elements, sound, video, pictures, typography in one place. And
And
then
well,
processing, which
wasn't
was amazing. Sorry, yeah.
wasn't Flash way more visual? Like Flash was like a visual program. Like it really
Yeah, I
wasn't.
mean,
Yeah.
it allowed you to do everything. I mean, it allowed you to, first of all, it ran for a while on all platforms. You kind of, except for Linux, but let's say you wrote your code once and then you deployed it through the plugin, and you could see the same thing in on a Mac and on a Windows machine in your browser. So that was fantastic. So you could build the craziest stuff, and
How
everybody
did
could.
you make Flash though? Like how did you create it? Through Photoshop. It was like an Adobe thing,
No,
right?
yeah, it was another tool. Like at first, it was another tool. Like there were several tools. So one was, Macromedia Flash or Adobe Flash later on,
Yeah, Macromedia Flash.
which
Yes.
was just another tool. Like that had a timeline, and so it
Yeah.
was initially made
Okay.
for animation, but it also allowed you have this code panel, and so after a while, they put out something called Flex Builder or so, and that allowed, it was more looking like a general code editor. And so in the end, you had it compiled down to a single file usually. I mean, I don't want to bore you with the details, but in the end, yeah, you had this
I've
one
used
file.
it, and that's why I was wondering. I was like, I remember learning it in college. We had to, and I didn't like using it. You know, it wasn't my thing, but I remember that it was easy enough for me to use that it felt like almost like I was able to use it, not writing language at all. It was just visual, where I could put points and like drag things around and shit, and then I could make animations. And I remember them telling us like, oh, they're using this to make animations in Adult Swim. You definitely need to learn this.
Right. Yeah, it was big. I mean, that's the other thing. So, okay, so first you could just do manual animation like stop motion, or you could code it, or you could combine the whole stuff, and you could combine images with that. So what happened was that there was a huge community around this, and at that time we were the cool guys. So it was and that's also where the art stuff starts, because there were, like, now, all these NFT events and festivals and stuff where you meet all the cool people, like we met in London.
Yeah.
And we had that. And there was Flash Forward. There was,
Flash Forward.
FITC. So there was huge events with thousands of people and talks. And so at some point, because I kind of had my own experimental thing, I got actually nominated for kind of experimental category of the Flash Forward kind of festival. And so because I was among the nominees, I decided, okay, let's have a look what this is, because in the end, like, I had never visited one of those conferences. And then I went there and said, whoa, pretty much probably like now, everybody who's doing NFTs and maybe starts with that and comes to an event like this and says, oh, there are others like me. This is amazing. And it's so creative. And you meet your heroes. I mean, back then there were already kind of some celebrities. You probably know Joshua Davis, right? There, he was, back then, he was the first pop star in this, in the, how you could say it, like, what are we doing? Creative visual world. So, and his talks were amazing. And there were others, Eric Natsky, Robert Hodgin, and so quite a few of the people who were big back then still. Oh, Brandon Dawes, of course. Oh, he made fantastic talks even back then. So, and it was all this kind of creative coding. And so, because that's the thing. So it was a platform and people used it for boring stuff, but you could also use it for the most crazy visual things. And so I went to that event. I think, it was some Flash Forward, and said, wow, I want to be part of this. Also, I want to be on that stage. And then I did some talks and showed more of my creative stuff. And then there was Off Festival, for example, that's still around in Barcelona, and they were having art shows. And at some point I got invited to show something. So that was kind of art. But of course, I still had to earn my money with different things. But over time, I got more invitations and showed more things, and slowly and even I don't know, at some point journalists start writing about you, and initially they always say, oh yeah, their computer programmer Mario Klingemann did this thing. I say, oh. So, and of course you want to be seen as an artist, but that's where also I kind of still didn't use the term. But so I think, the point starts when people, when you start calling yourself an artist, and then at some point finally journalists also call you an artist, and then it kind of, usually the circus does, you go to these events, you meet people, and at some point you get invited, and then you get invited more, then you hopefully can do better things, get more visibility, and Twitter helped too. I mean, that's kind of one of the things. I was lucky to be early on Twitter, thanks to Yeah, that was also happening at Flash time. So I could build up my followership. And yeah, in the end, it's kind of this combination of making stuff, but it also getting it seen, meeting people, getting invited. And at some point, something like a career comes out of that. So, and then, yeah, no, and then of course, sometimes you meet exactly the right people, and then you suddenly get a jump start. So, and I was lucky there. So
Yeah. Put all the ingredients in there and see what
yeah,
happens.
so I still don't know exactly the secret, but I think it's a combination of
Well, there is none, man. There's no
yeah,
secret
no,
of
it
anything.
works
For
differently for
everybody, it's
everybody. I
different.
mean,
For everybody, it's different. That's why it's
sorry.
interesting to hear the individual path. You know, your individual path is quite interesting. I want to also ask, like, so from Flash, how has technology then also been a like leading or a guiding thing, however you want to say it, because it seems like your career has evolved and your style has evolved along with technology. So you went from
Hmm.
Flash, after Flash, what did it go to? And like,
Oh, when
what
Flash
other kinds
died.
of work were you doing?
So yeah, when Flash died, that was bad. I mean, and I hung on long to it, so I couldn't believe that it was
When did it
actually.
die, would you say?
Well, there was the famous Steve Jobs thing where he kicked it off iPhones, and that was pretty much the beginning of the end. So it was just the time when kind of mobiles, kind of smartphones, or started to become the main devices.
Okay.
But and so there were Flash players for it, and it actually sounded also exciting, and you could build your own apps with Flash. Everybody could see them and use them. But there were, of course, I mean, I'm painting it in a very pretty picture. There were issues that Flash had security leaks, and on the early phones it was too slow. And so in the end, but since everything moved to mobile, and Flash was banned from mobiles, then it was just didn't have any future. So and in particular, of course, that Apple kind of absolutely hated Flash to the guts. So that was the death stab. So
Apple
yeah, and
killed
then
Flash.
I don't know, the slow decline began when, and then I mean, now you know that it's even kind of not running in any browser anymore. Before, it was almost like default installation in any browser. And of course, like if you can't show it to anyone, why should you use it? So I think it's still around in certain kind of, like when people like me built for, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, some application in Flash for some company, and they still use it. So
Well,
they
I
still,
remember it becoming annoying. I remember the plugin becoming annoying where it must have been near the end where it was like always needing updating, always coming
yeah.
these notifications like your Flash player needs to be uploaded, updated. And I just remember not even going to websites that needed it and just like not even dealing with this shit, you know?
But it's so funny because I mean, I think that was kind of also the beginning of when everything had to become updated. I mean, now we take it's just normal.
Sure.
Your
Yeah, that's true.
whatever
That's true.
Android, your iPhone's constantly getting updated, or your browser, and now
That's
nobody
true.
complains. But again, Flash was
I
too
do.
early with
I
those
fucking complain. That
updates. I
annoys the
mean,
shit out of me. Apple's really needy with their fucking downloads. They're always bothering me. It's just like, leave me a fuck alone. Like every day, it's like your shit needs downloading. I feel like every day I say tomorrow, and then it
yeah,
just bugs me tomorrow, and I say tomorrow. I'm like, if this was a human being, I would have extricated them from my life by now.
yeah.
Like,
Talk about stealing time, right? Again,
yeah.
yeah. No, that's the thing. So, what happened then? I don't know. Well,
Well, something must have happened that you got into
oh
like
yeah,
these
no,
other
okay.
whole.
So there was, of course, this whole during my in the peak time of Flash, I already kind of got interested in this whole autonomy stuff. So autonomous
Mm,
creativity.
mm.
So making myself obsolete, teaching machines how to become me, to create kind of art by themselves. And so I started looking into image classification, of course, because the first thing before you actually can have a machine make something is like not the first, well, actually, it's the second thing, is that you also have to give it a sense of taste or judgment. So it
Mm.
can look at what it has done and then decide, is it good or bad? So, and so I got very interested in that. But with Flash, I had to resort to simple methods because also of course, neural networks had been around in the scientific community since ages, but as we know, it really started the boom started only 2012, 13, 14 with the classifiers. And I was I built my own image classifiers that were able in some way to, look at an image and give some valuable information back, like, is it art or is it sport or is it text? Yeah, so I started from that theory, so that we look at a photo or something on a screen and we immediately categorize it, right? And so we say, oh yeah, this is like a basketball game. This is, I don't know, kind of a screenshot from a news site. Oh, this is art. So there was this idea, you look at an image and very often you would classify it as art. And I got curious.
That's interesting.
What is it about that image that distinguishes it from a basketball image?
Yeah, and this is different from how neural networks are being used at this point, right? Like,
I mean, at that point, of course, people have been working on it, and that idea is age old. Actually, it goes even back to the pioneers.
Yeah, that's the idea, but the neural networks being used in that way, that seems different because, I mean, and maybe not, that maybe to you it's not a big distinction, but from what I understand, the neural networks at that point, the classifiers, what they were doing was being fed information on what something was, and then fed these other images, and it was saying, that's it, that's not it, that's it, that's not it. And that makes sense. Like, I can kind of wrap my head around that. But when you bring the idea of, is this art or not? Or that's a different concept.
Well, not really. I mean, in the end, you can theoretically train it the same way. You just, instead of throwing dogs and cats in one bin, you just throw everything that looks to you like it might be art.
Besides though, that like art encompasses so fucking much. But if you just teach something, is this a face? Is this not a face? It can look at it and be like, 2 eyes, nose, mouth, face, got it. Is this art? Like,
yeah, of course. That's also, I'm saying this because, of course, that was kind of my also almost naive approach. But saying like, okay, but yeah, I started simple, right? I mean, I didn't even go. I mean, I also said like, do I like this or don't I like this? So this could also be. I mean, it could be.
Well, that's more interesting.
Image meant as art.
Subjective. How would you teach it whether or not something's art or not? Or you would have to teach it like a definition of art first, but then where do you get the definition of what art is first?
Well, how do we get the definition of what art is first?
Well, we don't have one.
Art history, right?
You want to talk about it? We can spend the rest of our time talking about
that. Well, and then that's exactly the whole interesting part. So, but at first I really wanted to stay on the pixel level, leave out any metadata, any kind of all that other information that actually is much more important for the art than that final image. But at that point, I was just interested in kind of a coarse thing that allowed me to kind of show it an image and then tell me kind of, oh, I believe this belongs in the art category or not. And and it's really simple. You just have to collect examples, and then you can start simple by the low-hanging fruit, and give it some Mona Lisas and Monets and I don't know, some Pollocks, and on the other hand, you give it everything else that comes across. And that's what models do. They try to find, how can I divide this? Like, what is in this set that allows me to divide it from that set? And I used very simple features. So in a way, I did not use neural networks, but rather came from, I don't know, general kind of perception stuff. Like, in a way, how does the human eye work? So we look for edges, we look for colors, we look for contrast, we look kind of all these elements which you can calculate without. So you calculate statistics on an image, and then in the end, you turn it still into a bunch of numbers. And astonishingly, like, if you have enough features, that allowed some pretty good kind of results. So I use that actually and that's kind of where I think the whole art stuff began getting more serious. So there was this huge collection from the British Library back then, which they put on Flickr, so 1 million images, and they were all not classified. And and that was fun because you could make discoveries there. You could kind of click through the images and maybe discover some really amazing bird or map, which at that point nobody had seen before except the last person who took out the book. But you could see how many views this thing had. And so the British Library was looking for people who would help them kind of classifying. And that was a task where I could use my rudimentary techniques. And so I found 50,000 maps and birds and rocks. And that work kind of got then the attention of the Google Arts and Culture. And they asked me, "Oh, we are working with data too. Do you want to have make a residence with us?" And so, of course, that sounded great. And
that was Google.
Yeah, that was Google Arts and Culture, which is this nonprofit where Google kind of helps museums and collections in general to digitize their material and make it available, of course, also to them. So, that in Paris there is the lab where kind of amazing people, much smarter people than me were kind of working, then could come up with ideas so now we have this amazing collection from whatever, the MoMA or I don't know, the Met Museum. So what can we do with it? How can we build tools around it using all the power of neural networks, etc. And so, and that's where I was able to build X degrees of separation. So that's, I don't know, still a project I really like. So in short, because it covers all these topics that I like. So in the end, I'm using the feature vectors. So I classify all the images that are in the database using the Google's image feature vector, the same that you can see when you search for images on the web, on their site, and build a graph kind of from this, how similar every image is to every other. So you kind of try to couple together images that are more similar than others, and you build almost like a roadmap. So you can imagine now you have this whole map of connected images, and then you can ask, okay, how do I get from the Mona Lisa to I don't know, Mondrian? And so because not every image is connected to every other, but it's more like a kind of cities are connected with highways. And so it has to kind of step from one to its nearest neighbor, and then actually does a shortest path search, like in the games, right? Like an A* search. So, and the result is really amazing because you get these gradients through feature space where kind of in the end, it results in this kind of set of, artifacts, images, where on the left, it would be, let's say, the Mona Lisa. On the right, it would be, the famous Mondrian. And then it goes through different artworks to get there. So how do you get from a portrait to kind of a geometric, kind of very colorful thing? And then astonishingly, it finds these intermediate steps where, I don't know, first maybe it might go from a painted Mona Lisa to, I don't know, maybe a version of it which was geometric, or and then the lines change, and then the color, it finds something where the colors are closer. And the beautiful thing is that along the way, you find a lot of stuff which nobody usually looks for, because everybody's just looking for the shiny stuff, the famous stuff. And I like that because it allowed you to make discoveries, and and so that
it has a different bias.
It has, bias. Of course. I mean, in the end, it still has the bias of art history and what was worth digitizing and what was worth preserving.
Absolutely.
At the same time, actually, I must say, Google was trying to kind of get as much diversity into the data set by getting kind of collections which are not Western oriented. So, I mean, I actually don't have anything bad about Google to say, and I'm not part of it. And but I felt they they were very responsible about the data. I mean, in the end, I just got kind of this tiny view. I mean, I just was in the culture department there, but it felt kind of that. I mean, the moment you wanted to do anything with personal data, of course, all these ideas, right? Like, oh, let's do kind of find my face in art, and that is actually kind of Cyril, yeah, he built then actually something, but it took like 2 years or so until it could be published because of all the like the personal data stuff where you had to make sure that no face is actually stored on the server. So yeah, that was actually like, it's much easier if you're not part of a company to build kind of irresponsible stuff. So, yeah.
I want to ask about earlier on what you said about you were using these or using AI with statistics, right, over neural networks instead of neural networks or something like that, right?
Yeah, because I couldn't use them back then. Yeah.
Well, could you just briefly say like what the difference would be, or like how that is different, or like what a neural network would do and what you did differently, or how it works differently? I don't even know what the question is.
I mean, as the way I kind of explained it to myself is, in a way, both of them are doing the same thing, but you could say that my approach was almost more the rule-based logical thing, where I say, okay, what things can I measure in an image? I don't know, like, for example, histogram, right? The distribution of colors is something that makes sense. The distribution of edges, the kind of certain weightings. And so in the end, like, all of these single things then get thrown together into kind of one big feature vector. And in the end, what neural networks do is almost kind of figure out by themselves what they have to look for in images, but what they measure is very similar, only that nobody tells them, oh, you have to first try this and that.
Well,
and
how
that.
do they do that? Like, how do they do that at the beginning? Like, they just analyze
like
the image.
gradient descent. So in the end, they have a certain amount of resources, you could say, in kind of like, that's the weights, how many weights they have. And then they have, of course, the architecture, which kind of boils down the image kind of from many pixels to very few.
Okay.
And then it just has to be efficient about it. It has to figure out kind of, well, it doesn't ask like, what do I have to measure? But by starting with random things over time,
it determines what's measurable.
It almost builds filters. And like in the early classifier networks, you can kind of almost see in the first kind of convolutional, what's it called? Yeah, the weights, which are very simple because they remind a lot of the things that you use in Photoshop, like these simple kernels where I don't know, you have this typical kernel which measures an edge, which is then like, okay, subtract all the pixels in the upper half from those in the lower half. And if you have an edge, this will create a strong signal. Like if there is a kind of a corner, then this function will definitely, an edge will trigger something, whereas if you have something else, it will not. And when you look at these kind of filters that the neural networks evolve, you can see that they exactly measure this. Depending on the data, they will measure edges and certain gradients and color distributions. And of course, and then they also deeper down balance out kind of how much contribution does the edge have to versus color. And yeah, so in the end, I believe they measure the same. Probably, of course, neural networks measure more because that's the thing. They do not have to find rule. They just have to figure the most efficient way. And we, with logic, probably think we know the most efficient way because it seems to make sense to us, but we never know if there might be. And neural networks are in the end much faster because I have to calculate that every feature separately, whereas in the end, so with a neural network, you just feed it in and it makes everything within seconds.
Between those two, though, you get different outputs between them, right? Like, so both are relevant, right?
Well, in the end, the data kind of defines how much
Okay.
different outputs you get, right? So it's the data distribution that, in the end, will show if you measured enough or not enough, or if you focused on the wrong kind of on the wrong elements. Because I don't know, you thought your data is only consisting of this, and then the model never saw something else. I don't know. You only trained it on faces, and then it sees houses. So it never learned how to properly look at a house. It expects eyes and hair and noses and not windows. But it still makes interesting mistakes then, right? It will
of course,
very likely think, oh, yes, the windows are eyes, and I don't know, the door might be a mouth. So,
and that's where you get like creative with things, or you can
exactly,
get creative,
that's
it sounds like.
fun.
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to kind of fast forward a little bit, I think, to some of like the more relevant things that you're known for, because we haven't even really touched on like you've achieved a level of success and notoriety for the work that you've done, and I want to talk about some of that and how that became. What was the first project that really got? I know you're working directly with Google, but I wasn't even aware of that. I mean, I really wanted to talk about your AI artist that you created a separate artist. Would you say that that was a big deal when you came out with that? Did that further things, or was there something before that that really sparked interest in your work?
Okay, so Memories of Passersby was, I think, the first bigger work that got quite some attention. But then the second one is Memories of Passersby. So what did I say? X Degrees of Separation. And
Yeah,
Memories
X
of
degrees of
Passersby
separation was.
is the kind of this standalone AI which creates this infinite stream of portrait faces, kind of. You might have seen the picture. It's this beautiful cabinet made of wood, which actually houses the computer. And then you have the two big screens. And after I made this, I got invited by Sotheby's if I wanted to put it into or I don't know, not even my gallery. I don't know. Sometimes these things happen behind where I don't even know how this happened. But at some point, Sotheby's wanted to auction this in a regular. There was no computer art thing, right? So there was a Warhol and I don't know, some other stuff, and then there was my screen and my computer, which in hindsight also showed me how difficult it actually is to sell kind of something that's so different, because art buyers on that level are actually quite conservative and prefer good old paintings, because there is not the question like, okay, but what if the GPU breaks, or also I think and it sold for kind of and that was the thing. So of course we all remember, I don't know, what was it, half a year earlier, Obvious with their sensational what was it, Bellamy thing which made this sold for sensational, what was it, 400 something $1,000. So which surprised everybody. And then of course I came along with the second AI work, I think it was, and expectations were high, and that's always bad. So I was saying, if that sold for 400,000, then this must go for $1 million. And in the end, I think it sold for $60-something thousand. So, which, of course, when everybody expects much more, was kind of a bit of a disappointment. In the end,
but what year is this? 2020? No, 2019, 2018?
No, that's 2018, I think.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and but in the end, it was an edition, and all the others sold. So it's, but of course, it's always a bit of a bummer when people expect too much.
Just unrealistic expectations and overhyping shit,
Yeah, and in the end, it was complicated, right? So it's kind of some alien piece of like, okay, what is this? Like, we buy a computer here.
65K ain't nothing. That's a respectable amount of money.
Yeah, no, and I mean, this was my biggest sales up to
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
So
You
that
get your
was,
biggest sale and it's a disappointment to everybody else, and to you it's
yeah,
like
yeah. So
literally the
it's
most I've ever
ridiculous.
gotten.
And we're not in the age of NFTs yet, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
this
exactly.
would
That's what
also
I'm
like,
saying, you
oh,
know?
there's a million here and there. No, no. So this was, for me, it was great. But of course,
Yeah.
it was still like, a bit of an ego thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
in the
exactly.
end,
Yeah.
it's, well, it's still one of my like favorite pieces, and it still works. I mean,
It's
it's
an
going
important
on,
important
and
accomplishment as well.
yeah, and of course it gets invited to shows all over. Like, so it has traveled kind of all over the world. So that's the other thing that's then starts happening, right? You get invited to more prestigious shows, and yeah, and then I got more commissions, and I don't know, one of my other well-known pieces, which is Uncanny Mirror, which is kind of this piece where kind of that real-time AI mirror that learns from, almost like steals the soul of people who look into. No, not really. So in the end, while you look into it, it reconstructs whatever it sees in you from everything it has seen before. So, but of course, at the
Man.
same time, while you look at it, it also learns your features and adds them to its knowledge about, well, how humans look like. And so it's constantly learning and changing its weights, and at the same time creates this very uncanny kind of early AI aesthetic, which, and people have fun with it. And yeah, that's
What year was that?
hmm?
When was that you had
That
that?
also was around, I mean, not even sure, must have been also 2019 or so,
Okay.
or was it 18, 19.
Pre-pandemic.
I always kind of, that's the other thing, I never, once I finish something, I forget about it almost. Like, it's just, then somebody says, oh, we would like to show this, and say, all right, yeah. So, so
What was
fortunately I
that?
can now say, please get in touch with my gallery, and they know how to ship this. And so that's that's good. But so yeah, it was around the same time. It was still kind of the time when AI was still a bit hard, in the sense
Mhm.
that you had to write your own code and build this, and where the field was still kind of, well, you knew that 10,
Mhm.
20 people who were doing it. And now of course it totally changed. But yeah, enjoyed that a lot. And so I mean, my last big, no, my second last bigger piece is appropriate response. Not sure if you've seen that. It's kind of this airport display with like a split flap display, like that makes the beautiful sound, like on airports in the olden days.
Oh, okay.
And that is connected to a computer which is housed in a kneeler. So it's kind of the interface is a piece of furniture where you kneel down in front of the piece, and then the machine will, with the help of GPT-2, generate a epigram for you at that time, at that
What's
moment.
this called?
It's called appropriate response. So it's kind of this, of course, it plays into the whole idea of us perceiving AI maybe almost like an god or an
Yeah.
oracle, or and all these fears and hopes we put into it. And
That's
at the same time, of
powerful.
course, it plays with meaning, the idea that of course the machine does not really know the meaning, but in that feedback loop between you looking at it, you actually make sense, maybe out of your own circumstances,
Damn.
from that sentence you see. So you could also say it's a big fortune cookie, and
Yeah.
it works on the same mechanism, right? So
Mhm.
it gives
Yeah.
you, hmm,
Yeah, I was just agreeing with you. Yes,
yeah,
I get it.
and yeah, and so the
The
last
kneeler thing
big,
is really cool to me. I have a uh I went to Catholic school all my life and shit like that. So
hmm,
when you said that, I'm thinking of like whatever the room is that you do like confession or something, where you like go into a room, you go down the kneeler and you talk to the priest and whatever, but instead of a priest it's the AI. Like that's
yeah,
really, to me that's really powerful. I like Really
Yeah,
interesting.
also I wanted to, there's always this problem when you make machine art is that it's kind of a bit too related to other machines like automats where you expect kind of like you press the button and then it does something for you. So, and I felt kind of in order to fully appreciate it or to create almost like a little situation rich, like I had to create some ritual that creates
Hmm.
a situation where you interact with that machine on a different level instead of just, because of course you could just press a button and it prints out a receipt and but yeah, I wanted
The
to,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah,
that's
that's actually my
really where
favorite
you're.
work so far,
Yeah, okay, that
definitely.
makes sense. I mean, I love this idea, and like you're really adding a lot. It's not just about AI or anything. You adding this experiential element to it. It's very much like a postmodern conceptualist. Kind of. I could see this in a gallery. Like type
Yeah,
thing.
so
Um,
I mean that's the
Kind of like
thing, right? Like that's always the difficulty. Like now you have these powerful tools, and what ways can you kind of bring it, like integrate it into an art piece without making it just kind of a gimmick? I mean,
exactly.
it's
Yes, yes.
very
Without it
tempting,
being a
and
gimmick.
so
Yeah.
and
When you said fortune cookie too, I was like, it's like a magic 8 ball. It's like, yeah, shake it out and it gives
yeah,
you the other,
yeah,
and then
no,
you
exactly. So
interpret that. Yeah,
no, it
that's
works
really
on the
cool.
same psychological
Yeah.
mechanism. So that's, of course, again, which I find interesting, seeing the human as a predictable or not predictable system where certain inputs you can, and we go to trigger again, or yeah, you can evoke
And it kind of,
certain reactions.
and this goes back to your main interest, like you said, is how things work,
Yeah,
right? So it's
exactly.
yeah, interesting. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. What and you said like this is the second last major work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So that's the thing with these major works; they take so much time, and of course, so the last bigger one. I mean, I'm talking about installation works now. Of
Hmm.
course, I made all these other things which are much easier in the NFT space, where
Yeah,
it's an image, it's maybe an interactive web-based thing, but
yeah.
so my heart is still a lot in these installations. But yeah, they're also a big headache. So I'm torn, right? So it's so much more comfortable and like to mint something and then
Hmm.
it's done. But so the last one is called the Garden of Ephemeral Details, and it was part of a show which was all about Hieronymus Bosch Garden of Delights. So there were many artists who all built created pieces around that theme. And so mine was kind of this, well, the classic painting, but it was constantly evolving. So the AI, you shouldn't say that, but okay, I just say it. So whatever, the machine is looking at the painting and then picks a place and then replaces it with something it has generated, but blends it in kind of very subtly. The whole process is very almost invisible. So the idea is, I mean, that in a way, the whole world around us is constantly changing in very subtle ways. So, and we often don't even notice kind of even bigger changes while they're happening, and suddenly we are in a different place. So, I don't
Different
know.
reality.
Yeah, and yeah, and then you wonder, oh, what just happened now? And
Hmm.
so, in that sense, I wanted to kind of in your face kind of change it, and then usually in the real world things stay that way or change on. They usually never go back to its previous state, and
Yeah, it's
in
like
this case
impossible.
I it heals, so it allows because that's then the nice thing that so well my code my model does not necessarily visually improve the painting, right? So it changes, it replaces, I don't know, humans with these amorphous sausage like shapes, well, the typical AI shapes, because the model sees it that way. And then but once it's there, you even start to remember, okay, what was there before? I'm not quite sure. And then once kind of the part has healed again, you can actually reappreciate what you lost along the way. So that's kind of the philosophy
That's
behind that.
very cool.
Yeah.
Where did you debut that, or where was that
That
first?
was
Like,
shown in Madrid at the Matadero. So that was beginning of this, like last fall, beginning of this year. So yeah,
okay,
I think it ended in February, something like that. So yeah,
awesome. I
and
want to
yeah.
also,
So,
I just wanted to also touch on this, the one project that I actually had a chance to interact with. This place, I think you called it, right? Um,
oh, display. Oh yeah, yes, right. That was made for God. What was
a
Mikol's
proof
event
of
called?
people,
Huh?
proof of
NFT what?
people,
No, no.
proof of people.
Oh, of course. Sorry. My memory is something. Yes. So I built this for Proof of People, and it was my second real-time minting installation. So
And the
which
first
allowed
one was for
people.
Miami, right? Basel. Yeah,
So the
okay.
first one was at Art Basel Miami, where I built the kind of multi-face replacement, which was kind of almost like a best of, which included almost uncanny mirror plus some other face stuff. And yeah, I think people minted back then 4,000 or so. And I think it was a
Nice.
big success. Unfortunately, I could not see it myself. But and the second one was Displays, which again I wanted to create a nice experience. Also, kind of this idea of allowing people to do what I usually do behind closed doors, like
Cool.
navigating latent space. Kind of this experience of exploring this universe that the model has created,
Hmm.
and the interface in this case was a classic kind of joystick, multi-axis joystick, which I found interesting to use because, of course, in latent space you have, I don't know, 128 dimensions or degrees of freedom, and you cannot really navigate that with like in an intuitive way.
Hmm.
Well, you can try to. And so I tried to find some mapping which would allow people to use a joystick and explore it. And then a bit also like a game where
Yeah.
you had a certain amount of time. And then at some point, you either, well, your time ran out and you got whatever your last frame was, or you could kind of press the button when you saw a frame and try to catch that. Yeah,
Try to, but it
fun.
went very fast. It was like it was never static. Like it
Yeah.
never stopped. Actually, it was like always in
So in the
motion.
end, I
So
built this also in the knowledge that this was made, like this was a club, right? So it was in the cellar, lots of screens around. So I wanted to create something not so subtle. So it should be steal people's attention, right? So I wanted it that kind of people look and, oh, what is this guy doing there? So there's something blinking and moving fast. So I want to try it too. So yeah, that was very much attention minded.
it's and so from the experience of the user, it was really fucking cool for me. Like, so I was there like early setting up our own
Yeah.
installation, where we first met. Then you were just finishing setting it up. I might have been like one of the first people to try it, not besides you, but I remember like asking, "What do you do?" And you were like, "You just do it. You have to figure it out. Like I don't
Yeah.
tell you, like." And that I only used it twice, I think, but I immediately was like intrigued and felt like engaged with it and felt the gamification of it too. And I remember wanting to go up for a second time because I felt that like I can do better than the first time, or like I can capture another picture or something, because it was almost like a shooter where it was like when you see the image, actually like the image cycled enough times that I was trying to catch the pattern, like when does a strong image emerge versus like a more foggy nothingness abstraction. And when you look at the two pieces I got, one of them is a little bit more abstract and one of them's clear, but it never really clarified. But anyways, just need to
Hmm.
say that it was a very engaging experience even for that short amount of time, and it was very intuitive in the way that I could tell that you really thought about that, like you really.
I don't know. I'm not a game developer, but yeah, of course, I thought like,
Well, it's
yeah,
like
in
you
the end,
used
it's
it
a
and you thought,
UX
how would I
problem.
do
Right?
this? Like, how would I intuitively
Yeah.
use it? And then applied that. It's almost how it felt. And it was really cool. So I just wanted to bring that up. I like the two pieces I have even. They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that,
But yeah,
I
you're
just thought it
right.
was a
I
great
also
experience.
wanted to build it in a way that like that it becomes a learning experience, and that you, well, when you try the first time and maybe watch somebody else, then you say,
Yeah.
oh, I haven't seen that. And so, yeah, to make it a bit addictive, or kind of, yeah, also this not
Well,
explaining. I
yeah,
hate
and I remember
explaining.
looking at other people's because you could go online and look at other people's profiles. So like what other people got, and then being like, well, that's better than mine.
Competition. Well,
Yeah,
maybe there is still a chance to show it at some other event. I don't know. So,
maybe, but I kind of like that as a close thing. I've actually seen people putting offers in and stuff on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
anything
I
from that
mean,
collection, which is great. That's really
yeah.
cool, like phenomenon.
Well, that would be nice,
Uh,
of course, like, because in the end, yeah, I think I got a few for myself, but in the end, it's also about kind of that fun, and it was a challenge for me. I always like a good challenge, and so I wanted to just build something with those components and see, and yeah, it seemed like people liked it, and that was
yeah.
my reward. So
Well,
yeah,
they definitely liked it. There was a line, many times throughout most of the weekend or most of the time that it was going on. So
yeah,
yeah, it was
very
definitely a
cool.
hit. So, okay, in the last little bit, I want to ask you some well, first question, your feelings on the anthropomorphizing of AI.
Oh, okay. It's a good story, and people like stories, so that's why we do it. I mean, so I hate bullshit stories about AI where people say, "Oh, the AI is doing this," but when you are, and I would not say it's kind of like a human being, but working with these models, it's an entity in some way which shows partial intelligent or outputs or behavior that feels intelligent, and which makes it compelling, and that why sometimes I might even call it a name. But in general, I don't know, we are fascinated by intelligent behavior in non-human entities, and we love animal videos where animals are doing funny things that humans could do. And now we have this new toy, or this new thing which also does that. And we can't help it but get kind of personify it, or believe that there is something ticking behind it. But in the end, of course, right now they are not conscious, or but I don't know. I don't know how many people I'm communicating with on Twitter are. So, no, or in the end, like sometimes the AI has more interesting output. Yeah, yeah. So in the end, it's
Yeah, I mean, it really does. It comes down to a question of like, what is intelligence? What is programming? Are humans programmed? All that kind of shit. I find it to be a very interesting question. I want to actually pry just a little bit further because you brought it up about the consciousness. Do you think the idea of a conscious machine or conscious AI, whatever you want to call it, or a sentient AI is a possibility? Or do you think that that might be just like a general affront to nature?
no. So I don't believe in magic. That's the first thing. So even though I like to do it, but and so I don't think there's any secret ingredients. And I go with Joshua Bach, where I believe conscience is almost like an emergent property of complex information systems, but
Hmm.
we cannot really measure it, right? We can only kind of, like, I don't, yeah. So we cannot kind of, there's no measuring tool that where you can say this is conscious or not.
Yeah.
So in the end, I believe it's whatever machines will come, they will appear conscious to us, even, and we will never be able to tell if they are or not. And so
Well,
I
because
don't
we
think
don't know
that
what the.
consciousness is almost, it's like a prerequisite for intelligent behavior. So we can already see that kind of ramping up, and machines like behaving or showing more and more
Hmm.
like things that we would usually have expected from a human. So, and that will just gradually continue. And the more data machines get, and of course there's this whole body stuff, right, where that's currently missing them, and we get a lot
This
of
body
data from
stuff,
our
man.
bodies. And once kind of you put it maybe into a robot, then it will also create a sense of body, and that will make it
Yeah.
move in ways where it looks human, and will make us even more attribute human-like properties to it. But yeah, philosophers have been going on for centuries about this thing, and I think it's almost like consciousness is almost like an illusion that our brain kind of plays for us. So it's and maybe something is happening inside these machines which is similar, but I mean, there's this okay, and now you could then come to, I don't know, ethical considerations and saying like, oh, but then does it suffer? Or in the end, like, there's this one big difference between machines and us, is that you can turn an AI off and on again, and it will be like nothing ever happened, and you can't do that with us yet, right? You can't make a backup of and so they will always be different, because they don't die, and if you don't die, you have very different like
motivations, everything,
goals.
like,
I mean, if you don't die, you don't even have to like worry about time. So except if maybe
motivation for everything is different.
A big rock is falling from the sky and you have to find a way how to solve it, but otherwise there's different motivations.
I mean, that's really interesting to me. It's, makes me think about how maybe consciousness will be different in a machine, or like maybe because the way that you said it is an emergent phenomenon in complex systems. And so maybe the consciousness will be a different consciousness that emerges. Maybe a different thing will emerge because, like you said, they won't have the consideration of time. So clearly just that alone means it won't be a human consciousness, because our consciousness is governed by the ideas of death, time, etc. So it's just maybe different. But it feels to me that a lot of these AI proponents tend to think that the complex system of AI will get complex enough that our consciousness will jump to it or something, or the consciousness within us is going to be in it, which seems far off, impossible.
No, that seems, I mean, there is this whole thing, of course, where it could get interesting, is this whole brain computer interface.
Sure.
Where let's say you have some way of interfacing to a machine, and at first it's not part of yours, but let's say there is communication, information flow, and at some point whatever is external feels like you thinking, I don't know. And so I would believe there is a way to almost extend your brain, and like I don't know how this will then feel like, or if you suddenly I mean in the end, like, it will probably just used for spam or so, but it seems like a potential. No, I mean, that's the problem with all these brain interfaces, that of course, like, now you have Twitter and or whatever, like, getting bombarded, or your pop-ups, and having the idea that somehow there is some bridge to this directly. This is a security nightmare. But let's imagine there is a way to first start very simple, like you just get like some kind of memory that like memory extension, where your brain at some way manages to interface with that, and it feels like, and it will use it just, and well, I guess it might become part of, it's science fiction, but it does not feel like totally impossible to me. And then there might be a way that, like, once you add more components and more components, these components take more of you over, and at some point that component, then the silicon one, is able to emulate the carbon one, and you might be immortal through that. Like if the carbon starts rotting, but there's still that other part of you. But yeah,
It's a
probably I will
fascinating
not
topic
be around.
altogether. That's why I ask, it's fascinating. I want to jump now to the other side completely of that into like a more philosophical and personal question. Where is your art? Or like, where does your art lie? Does your art lie, in your opinion, in the final output of all of these processes that you're coming up with? Or to you, is your real art the processes that you're coming up with? Or third option is just like, are you the piece of art, and once you die, it's like your masterpiece was your life?
Okay. I mean, I personally am very much interested in the underlying concepts of my artworks, and in that sense, almost like the algorithms that I produce are probably most of my art. But I think it's hard to generalize. I mean, there are other pieces that are pictures, and like those are my art, where they are separate from the algorithm. There are others like the installations where I believe the art lies in the coming together of all those parts. I mean, usually that's probably my answer, that it's just the same thing with like human life, where if you take apart the human, like try to find where is life, in the end nothing is left. So all the parts have to play together. So it's of course the piece you see, it's the ideas and intentions that went into it, it's me telling you a nice story about it, and being grumpy or whatever, I don't know, like, so of course the artist is always a very important part of the piece, right? So it's, you can't divide that really out. I mean, with NFTs sometimes you seem to be able to, so that
People want to.
But I think in the end also, like, yeah, the artist persona is actually important who makes the artwork, not so much what does it look like, right? So at a certain point it comes to that. But so yeah, I think I don't have a clear-cut answer. So
No, but I find it super interesting. Did I cut you off? Were you about to say something?
No. I would just have repeated again and again. So sometimes I'm on auto repeat.
What I find interesting, being coming from like more of a lot of like computing background and stuff like that, but you always had this like, you've said it multiple times now, this like, you had to start calling yourself an artist to be an artist, or that's how you became an artist or whatever. You start calling yourself an artist or whatever. A lot of programmers, a lot of graphic designers, a lot of people who've taken the path that you have aren't interested in that title, or would never really, but you were. So being an artist and being a graphic designer, being an artist and being a programmer are very different things. And you seem more like the artist, and you saying that as that you develop a persona almost. That's a very non-technical thing. I mean, you can make it technical, but the idea of that has nothing to do with anything, like even your medium. It's just the idea of an artist. Like me and you share that. You and Michelangelo shared it. Like it doesn't matter what the medium is. Well, no, I'm just saying that like a lot of these
I believe, of course, there is a certain way of looking at the world, I guess, as an artist. Like and then it also doesn't really matter what you do. It's kind of rather like how you transform. You become a transformer of matter and information, and turn it into something else through you, which then hopefully kind of speaks to people, or that they can relate, or makes them happy ideally, or makes them think. And so but that I find that quite interesting, that art has this strange position there, where it's kind of, art is like religion or God. So it is magic, right? Because nobody can really explain how it works, but somehow, and it constantly morphs into something else, but we still say there's this something that is art.
It's a very amorphous, intangible, constantly changing. Nobody can say what it is. We can say what it isn't sometimes, No,
that's the thing. Sometimes, you rather can position it in space by what it not is, or where you think you're pretty clear, but then again, you're wrong again, right? It's kind of, that's how art, it kind of like adds its feelers, like by integrating like the Borg kind of things that weren't art before now also become part of it. So yeah, that's the
You certainly
fascinating.
have an
Of course,
artistic
artists
spirit.
are part of that ecosystem there.
You definitely have an artistic spirit. I've loved this conversation. Like, I never know what to expect going into conversations with artists who I feel work a lot differently than I do, or at least their output is different than mine. But then finding out how similar we actually are is really interesting to me, and I really enjoyed this quite a bit. So in closing, I would love to hear if you have anything you'd like to, like, promote or whatever shows coming up. I also am curious. You
I
mentioned,
do.
well, you mentioned a gallery too, so I'm interested about that too. If you could quickly say, like, if you're represented by a gallery, and how long you've been represented by them. I'm curious.
So my gallery is in Madrid. It's on Chaos. So
Okay.
they are rather small, and they kind of just support a few selected artists, but in a very nice way. I'm very lucky because they allow me to kind of realize things that I could never realize myself, and support me very well. So so help me with all those big projects that I think up, and so the thing we didn't talk about, kind of, it doesn't matter. It's Botto, right? So there is this project that I created, or that based on that, kind of taking that idea further of how can I make myself obsolete, or can I create something that people, like a machine, an entity which people perceive as an artist, and Botto is that. And so you can see it on Botto.com, but actually Botto is now exactly 1 year old, and we'll have a show in London. And let me let me check my calendar. I think it's in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let me just interject a little bit here. Botto is your, like, autonomous artist creation. Like, it's a autonomous art creator. And I know this background a little bit because I listened to you speak at Proof of People. So basically what it's doing is, like, consistently kicking out images. And then, correct me if I'm mistaken, there is a group of people, or a DAO, I think, that are kind of like the holders of the work of Botto, that then get to vote on what pieces that it's spit out as the mints.
Yes. So in a way, so Botto is like, starts knowing nothing about the world, and is just randomly almost creating a lot of works, just like everybody else is doing with AI. And its community, its DAO, every week gets kind of results to vote on. And from the votes, Botto learns, and it tries to kind of produce more of what its stakeholders, its community likes, and less of what they don't like. And so in that feedback loop, the idea is that its kind of sense of aesthetics, its taste, its topics will evolve over time. And at the same time, of course, it still needs human help in certain things, like, for example, people organizing exhibitions, talking, like, and it's not a gimmick project. So I'm pretty clear kind of right now. In its first year, Botto only used Clip and VQ GAN. And in the next step, it will, of course, use kind of now new models. And it also uses GPT-3 to speak. Like, it writes its descriptions and titles. And sometimes it gives an interview where I'm sitting, of course, and proxy the questions that journalists have to GPT-3. Sometimes I have to give like GPT-3 context about who Botto is. But I mean, so in the end, I hate bullshit. So it's kind of try to be very clear what Botto so far is and where it should evolve to. So the idea, it's a very long-term project, and over time it will get new abilities, and it
will grow up. We're 1 year old. Happy birthday to Botto.
Yes, so it
has a show in London.
Yeah, there will be a big show, a retrospective of the first year. And as far as I know, it starts on, don't get me wrong, because I have to be in London on the 25th. So I think it starts on the 26th of October. So yeah, that's
coming
soon.
Up. Absolutely. 26th of October in London.
We are broadcasting this. Sorry.
I think next week. So yeah, just
Okay, so then it would be perfect in
yeah, yeah.
time.
So
Yes.
real quick, well, I guess everybody listening, next week is now, but you're
Yeah.
also going to be minting into the Fakewhale vault, so that's really exciting. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So everybody that's listening, definitely check out the mint in the vault, which should probably be up by the time that this comes out. Definitely check out the show in London. I'm sure there's going to be documentation. Follow Mario. Mario, how can we follow you on Twitter? What is your handle for everybody?
It's down here, Quasimondo. I'm Quasimondo
Quasimondo.
everywhere. So
Killer. This has been a real pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation quite a bit.
yeah,
Thank you so much
Jesse,
for
that was
your time. Know
amazing.
how busy you are. Know how much you hate the bullshit. So no bullshit here.
No.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Mario, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, be careful with other people's attention, right? So be responsible. I try to be too. So if you don't have anything interesting to tweet, just don't tweet anything at all.
We're ending on that. If you don't have anything to tweet, don't tweet anything at all. Peace out, everybody.
All right. Good night.